the curtain. Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming to my show. It's called Australia Says a Welcome, Conditions Apply. Please putting your hands together and welcoming to the stage. It's me, it's Yianni, hello! Hello everyone. That was obviously not my real voice, but that is the voice some people worry that I will have. Because yesterday we had two ladies come in and apparently they said to Sarah Jane, who's on the ticket booth, "Is his accent very thick? Will I understand him?" So thankfully the answer to that is nah. Hello everyone, my name's Yianni. Lovely to be here in Australia. We're in Australia, aren't we? It's a great country, we all love Australia, eh? Great to be here. Obviously I'm back in Australia. I lived in the UK for 15 years. The UK is not Australia. You know, they've got some involvement, but it's not Australia. But it's nice to be back here, and it's also, I think, quite appropriate, since we are in Australia and we are in Perth, to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're actually doing this show, which are the Noongar people, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I think it's a lovely thing actually that we do that. You know, some people go, "Oh, just you've heard it 500 times, it's like tokenism." I'm like, but did you know who the local tribe were before they started doing that? I go, nah, well then it's worth it, isn't it? It's always nice. It's nice to be back in Australia. I do love it here. Although sometimes I feel like I don't belong here. You know, when people say, "Is his accent going to be very thick? Will I understand him?" Things like that. So I moved back from the UK after 15 years of living there, partly because they had a little bit of a political situation, and partly because my parents were getting older. I say were, they still are. No, I came back, fixed it right up, so if anyone wants the secret, see me after the show. And it's been nice being back. It's been nice having my family nearby. I had some nice career news. I got to do a show on the ABC. Anyone see my show on the ABC? It doesn't matter. And it's cool. Like they aired it. It was called Pockets of Equality. It was the show I did here in Perth about 3 years ago. And you know, they re-air it every now and then. I never know when they're going to re-air it, but I can always tell because I get a few Facebook messages and I get a few tweets and get a few emails. So the last time it aired, I got an email from this guy called Bruce, and it was very nice. And he wrote to me and he said, "G'day, Yianni. I just watched you on the ABC's Next Gen comedy show." So that's the show I was on. It was on the Next Gen comedy show. That was a show that the ABC put together to find the next generation of up-and-coming Australian comedy talent. Yeah? It's not the only time I've been on TV in Australia. The other time I was on TV in Australia was in 2001 on a show called Raw Comedy. And Raw Comedy is designed to find the next generation of up-and-coming comedy talent in Australia. So 2001 and 2019, eh? That's a pretty wide window. I have been up and trying to come for longer than a man on MDMA. And anyone who laughs at that has broken the law. But anyway, you should really watch Pockets of Equality if you get a chance. It's on iView. It's very good, especially for a new comedian. You know, that's what really elevates new comedians. 20 years of experience. It's great. And he wrote to me, he said, "I saw you on the Next Gen show. You are incredible, matey. Absolutely hilarious." And he wrote, "I'm 60. And I thought, oh, that explains the double spacing after the full stops. And I thought I'd seen everything, but you are the best comedian I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, "Bruce, stop it." Congratulations, mate. Just one question. You sound very Aussie, but may I ask if you actually are? It's just that your name doesn't sound very Aussie. Not that it matters, of course. Yours sincerely, Bruce." And I was just like, I don't understand it. Like, this guy lives in Australia in 2019. Like, he must be surrounded by Papadopouloses and Suloviches and Kwans. Like, I mean, what has he been in a coma? Like, and then I thought, maybe he has been in a coma. Yeah, maybe that's why he thinks my comedy is so fresh. And, so, you know, I'd almost understand it if he just saw my name, like, written out, right? But he'd listen to me speak for an entire hour. And I speak like this, right? I like to think I speak quite well, right? I speak like this. I don't fucking speak like this. And by the way, speaking like this is an Australian accent, isn't it? Because only Greek Australians talk like this, yeah? Greeks in Greece don't talk like this. They talk like this. Well, they don't, they speak Greek, but... And Greeks in Germany don't speak like this, they speak like this. Please, 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 money, money, money. And, you gotta laugh. And I looked up where he lived, interestingly. He signed off where he lived. I looked it up. Apparently, you know who his local MP was? Barnaby Joyce. I think he might have been the one getting Barnaby in trouble. Dear Barnaby, you sound very Aussie, but are you actually? Oh, shit. So, yeah, like, I mean, one of the reasons I sometimes don't feel 100% Australian is it's this. It's my name, right? It's my name. It's a real mouthful, you know, because names are like belly buttons, aren't they? Like, you know, everyone's got one. They're a direct link to your parents, and if you've got a weird one, you spend your whole life explaining it. So this is what I like to call an outie. Anyone else got an outie? Anyone else got an outie? A few people? Yeah. Most of you got innies, that's cool. It's fine. It's not all bad though, having a name like this. The good thing about having a surname like that is when I call Telstra or somewhere like that, spelling my name is the security question. Like, don't you want to know which way I parted my hair in the 90s? They go, sir, you've provided ample evidence. It's fine. But the thing is, when you have a weird name, sometimes people presume things about you, like, for no reason, right, apart from your name, okay? So when I was at university, I was at my girlfriend's parents' house, and had, like, her uncle was there, right? We were all hanging out for the whole day, and we're at the dinner table, and her uncle started talking about Steve Waugh, right? So I was like, cricket, right? About cricket, I can talk about this, blah, 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 Steve Waugh, what a great captain. And then in the middle of this, for no reason that I can particularly discern, he turned to me, and he was like, oh, I don't suppose you like cricket. I don't suppose you like cricket? You've thrown me quite the googly there, my friend. I don't suppose you like cricket. Like, what am I, most people? You're right, kumbare, I don't like cricket. I like soccer, spanakopita, and anachronistic stereotypes. Yeah, don't worry about the word anachronistic, I didn't steal it from you. It's Greek. I don't suppose you like cricket. Let me fix that for you. Yianni, do you like cricket? It's pretty easy, just ask, right? But it was no, I don't suppose you like cricket. Now the first thing about that is, he did suppose, didn't he? That's what supposing is. It's just to assume something with absolutely no proof. You know, for example, like, I suppose elephants might not like peanuts as much as cartoons have led us to believe. Ironically, when he said, I don't suppose you like cricket, what he really meant was, I suppose you don't like cricket. Should have pointed that out, but I didn't think that, you know, running linguistic rings around him was the solution to that particular sticky wicket. And like, he's not a bad person, but it just made me think, like, why did he feel the need to say that? Like, you know, I mean, like, okay, I sound very much like him. I don't look that different to him. I go to university with his niece. Like, you know, none of these things make it impossible that I could possibly like cricket. The only thing I can think of is, like, it's my name. He must be like, oh, he's a strange and alien being who, you know, doesn't really live amongst us. You know, I must explain everything to him. And I was just like, it wasn't like I was like, you know, I was just being normal. Like, it wasn't like I was doing the Borat thing where I was walking around the house with a bag of shit going, where to put? No. And the irony of the whole thing is, I'm a Test cricket missionary. Yeah. I once explained Test cricket to an American backpacker in a hostel in Amsterdam. That's when I realised how insane Test cricket is as a sport. I had the salt shaker and the pepper shaker and a whole bunch of napkins and shit. And I was like, so the two batsmen, he goes, whoa, stop, there are two batsmen? I was like, okay, look, if you stop every single time something's weird, it's going to take 10 years, right? And I think when I really lost him was like, and then they stopped for tea. So I finished explaining cricket to this guy, and he was like, it sounds really stupid. Like, you mean you play for like 5 days and there might not even be a winner? And I was like, yeah, it's like the Iraq War. And, which was super topical at the time. And I thought, that's quite funny, right? So I wrote it down, because that's what you do when you're a comedian. You write down your funny stuff. And I kept it in my notebook for 4 years until Twitter came around, and I thought, I'm going to tweet that. I'm going to tweet that little thing. So I tweeted, like, I was talking to an American about Test cricket. He said, that sounds really stupid. You mean you play for 5 years and there might not be a winner? And I said, yeah, it's like the Iraq War. And one person retweeted it. It's not always about quantity, is it? Sometimes it's about quality. Honest to God truth, you know who retweeted that? No, not Bruce, but it's a good guess. No, only the Iraqi fucking government. I don't know how they found it. They must have been vanity searching Iraq, and it's popped up and they've gone, yes! retweeted it. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. But the funniest thing about that was that they didn't retweet it, they quoted it, right? Which is just slightly different. So it says like, at Yianni A said, and then it has the tweet. But because you use those characters for at Yianni A said, it cuts those characters off the end of the tweet. So what they actually retweeted was, I was explaining Test cricket to this American guy. He said, that sounds really stupid. You mean you play for all that time and there might not even be a winner? And I said, yeah. Which is actually a very good description of Test cricket. And so, you know, and it's a generational thing, the surname. Like, it's not just me, it's my dad as well, okay? So, my dad is a lawyer, and he used to run a home office from home, right? So sometimes people would call our house to call my dad in his capacity as a lawyer, right? So the phone rang one day, and I picked it up, and it was this guy, and he was like, yeah, hello. Can I please speak to B. Juris? And I was like, B. Juris? No, there's no B. Juris here. And he goes, is this a lawyer's? And I said, yeah, but it's not B. Juris, it's Yianni Agisilaou. And the guy goes, oh, that's his name. I was like, B. Juris? Those are his qualifications? Like, it's Bachelor of Jurisprudence? Like, do you know what that means? It means that guy's looked at my dad's letterhead and gone, which of these is a name? Which of these is more likely to be a name? And he's come down on the side of my dad's abbreviated qualifications, right? Oh yeah, I'm gonna give it a go. Hello, can I speak to Barry Juris? You know, like, so, and I thought, you know, maybe I should change my name. Like, maybe I should change my name to my qualifications. Maybe that'll be easier to Google, yeah? Or we saw this really good comedian. What was his name? BCom Ons LLB. Hello, can I please speak to BCom Ons LLB? Oh no, he can't come to the phone right now because he's mounted to the wall. So, like, the thing you notice when you have a strange name is how often you get asked your name, right? Because for many of you who have an INI name, providing the name is a very seamless experience. You don't even think about it. Like, what's your name? John Smith. Oh, come on in, Mr. Smith. I'll just write that down because I already know how to write that, right? But for me, every single time, Yianni Agisilaou, oh, how do I spell that? Yianni Agisilaou, oh, how do I spell that, right? So what has happened, because I've had to have a whole lifetime of that, is I have coping strategies, yeah? Some of them are for you, like, you know, Agisilaou, how do you spell that? Or how do you say that? It's like a gigolo, but with an S. I learned that one pretty early on. Some of them are for me, right? So for example, sometimes the thing I will do is that people will be like, well, just for a bit of fun, just to keep it interesting for me, people say, what's your name? And completely deadpan, I'll go, it's Yianni Agisilaou, it's the usual spelling. And I think that's hilarious, because I think that that is a statement with even a microsecond's thought, you can see that it is absolutely ridiculous. And what I think is that that person will give it that microsecond's thought, realise how ridiculous it is, see that I'm making a joke, and then go, that's very funny, thank you very much for puncturing, which is what is often a quite an awkward moment, right? That's what I think is going to happen. That's never what fucking happens. Like, what generally happens is, I say, it's the usual spelling, and then there's just this silence, filled with nothing but pain. This poor person who's like fretting, going, am I meant to know how to spell this abomination, right? Like, I mean, I expect to have to spell out the name, but not the joke. So, yeah, and sometimes, like, after all the rigmarole, like going through my name and doing the little jokes or telling, you know, everyone how to do it, like, it almost seems like an anticlimax, you know, for me, for my phone number when I get asked for that, for it just to be boring Arabic numerals, which personally I don't think we should teach in a Western society. And, so like my partner and I are looking for a house at the moment, so like often on a Saturday we'll go to 5, 6 houses. You've got to give your name and your phone number every single time. I've got to do the, what's the usual spelling? Oh, it's like a gigolo but with an S, blah blah blah. And like by the end I'm like, ugh, why should you get the reprieve of a normal phone number, Raymond Liu of Village Real Estate, you unnecessarily jacked Asian dude? No, I want to have a difficult phone number sometimes, right? I feel I should have a difficult phone number. I want to be able to answer the question, what's your phone number with? Oh, it's 04 ampersand love symbol. Ellipsis Mercedes logo, dynamic ribbon device. And then look over it and go, oh, you've got the shading wrong. The irony is that it's a super boring name. It just means John. Anyone here called John? Anyone here called, yep, John? Anyone here called Ian? Sean, Hans, Ivan, see, dude, there's 2 Yiannis in the front row, right? Okay, we never thought, it's super boring, it's really it's just a different version of a boring name, right? But, it's strange here, and that's kind of the point. So that's why my favourite place in the whole world is South Africa. I love South Africa. You know why? Because in South Africa, the Afrikaans version of John is Yianni. Right? Yianni, right? So when people say, what's your name? And I say Yianni, they just write that shit down. They spell it wrong, but I don't care. I don't care. It's just nice to feel normal, And the best thing that happened to me when I was in South Africa was I was hanging out with this other Aussie guy, and his name was Ben. And he rang up a restaurant to make a reservation for us, and all I heard was one side of this phone call, right? I just heard him go, yep, table for 3, please. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, Ben. Mm-hmm. B. E, and I was like, did that make you spell Ben? Mwah! Mwah, I'm moving here, right? It was so beautiful to see someone called Ben have to go through that. I was like, welcome to my world, bitch. It was so good. It was so good, it just felt nice. And that's the effect that it has. It's not like a terrible thing, but it does have an effect. It's fine now, but I remember when I was younger, I hated having a different name. I hated it. Right? And not even when I was that young. When I was 19, this is true, I was at a party that a friend of mine took me to with a whole bunch of his Brighton grammar mates, and they're all proper Anglo guys who all went to private school and whatever, and I lied about my name because I didn't think that they'd like me if I said my name was Yianni, right? So they were like, g'day mate, what's your name? And I was like, John. John! I'm not John, John parts his hair in the middle, he married his high school sweetheart, and he's got a pair of socks for every day of the week. I'm Yianni, Yianni, he doesn't take his own advice, he thinks too much, and he licks the toppings off barbecue shakes before throwing the biscuit away because he's looking after his health. That's Yianni. Maybe I should have changed my name. Some celebs change their name, Cardi B, you might be surprised to hear, her surname, not B. Her name is Belcalis Almanzar, right? And Nicki Minaj, her name is Onika Maraj, right? So both of those musicians made the sound choice to change their name to help them find commercial success. And you might be like, Yianni, if you're a musician, aren't all your decisions sound decisions? And you're right, good joke. And sometimes I think if I got really famous, then everyone would know my name, right? Then I get some respect. But it's not even true, okay? Because during the 2014 World Cup, or as it's called in Australia, the 2014 Soccer World Cup, or as it was called in Australia in the 80s, the Walk Ball World Cup, Tony Abbott went on TV and he made a nice message of support for the Socceroos. Very nice, right? He went on TV, draped in a green and gold Socceroos flag that he definitely already owned, and he said to Mike, Ange, and all the Socceroos, you'll take to the field in our names as we burn the candles at both ends watching you play, right? Which was lovely. It was very nice. Well, it is nice, except for the fact that the captain of the Socceroos' name isn't Mike. It's Mile. Not M-I-K-E, M-I-L-E, right? He's Croatian, that's his name, Mile, right? And I mean, that's a fucking disgrace. The Prime Minister's just eyeballed and gone, yeah, Mike. It's amazing. You're the Prime Minister of the country, show some respect. Also, you're a Liberal Party Prime Minister, so show a bit more respect. Not because this guy's the captain of the Socceroos, but this guy earns $10 million a year. He's part of your base. To Mike, Ange, and the whole Dago team. Yeah, you'll be doing us proud as we watch you playing a sport you probably got beaten up at school for liking. Yeah, so young people don't laugh at that. They're like, what? Everyone likes soccer. Yeah, now. Yeah, you couldn't like soccer back then. You're nodding a lot, right? Okay. Australia making the World Cup 2006, that was kind of like the gateway thing, and the A-League, and that's it. But before that, I'd be at school, and people would be like, what are you playing that walk ball crap for, mate? What are you playing walk ball crap for, mate? It's Australia. Play Aussie rules. Best game in the world. Best game in the world. And then you agree with them, you're like, yeah, it is a good game. They go, yeah, except the AFL. It's fucked, mate. Fucked! That's my impression of Australian. Not an Australian, Australian. Right? There's a difference. If you want to be able to identify an Australian, right, The thing is, the way that they talk, like they're speaking in some sort of verbal Morse code, like, you know, dot dot dash, dot dot dash. Country's fucked, mate. This country's fucked. The key is not to have any spaces between the words, because that's where the thought creeps in. and the other thing that Australians do is, like, they've got very strong opinions, but if you agree with them, they'll flip them 180, yeah? You'd be like, oh, this country's fucked, mate. Yeah, no, it is fucked. No, best country in the world. And then you agree with that. Oh, it is a pretty good place to be. Oh, except the government. That's fucked. Back, forth. Like, I was trying to think of a way to describe this. The best thing I could come up with was, yeah, nah. And, it's the best country in the world. Like, is it? Yeah, it's the best country in the world. Ever been anywhere else? I go, nah. Why? Why bother? Oh, you don't need to. Right? It is a great country. Look, no one's disputing that. It's a great country, Australia. People always say it when they come here. Like, no one's disputing that. But, you know, like, I mean, is it like, it's people talk like, you know, we just invented everything. Like, all of that stuff's like derivative. We all, like, half of it's American and half of it's English and half of it's from, like, all the immigrants who've come. Like, you'd be like, oh yeah, it's, you know, Australia's great because of the fur. You can get great fur here. Yeah, bloody Australian fur. You know, like, but you know, but half of our stuff is like stolen or derivative. I mean, what's an echidna? Shit hedgehog. A platypus is what you get if you let two team captains construct an animal by picking body parts. And Perth's just a meth lab with a housing estate attached. Bunbury? Oh, you like it when I do that, eh? Oh, listen, mate, don't talk bad about Perth. What about Bunbury? Oh, sink the boot in, mate. They deserve it. You all very, very quickly turned into sort of Perth Australians. Best city in the world. Because there's other things Australians do. They won't let you make any criticism, like, you know, that it has to be perfect. Like, you know, I mean, no one, I love Australia, but, you know, you can still say, well, we can improve on some things. Like, you know, I say things like, look, I just think Australia has always had a troubled relationship with immigration. And they're like, if you don't like it, mate, I can leave. That's why I'm really glad I lived in London for 15 years, because when they go, if you don't like it, leave, I'm like, I did, but, you know, I had to come back. You know why? Because the place I went had a troubled relationship with immigration. You can see the bind I'm in. Because personally, I think that slogan, don't like it, leave, might actually be achieving the opposite of what they think it does. Because it's possible that, like, refugees saw Australians with, like, the flag and if you don't love it, leave, and thought that it referred to where they were. You said if you don't love it, leave. I thought you meant Syria. I didn't love it, so I came. You must be pleased. And they're like, the grammatical quirks of the personal pronoun in the third person, huh? Like, I always thought people who say, if you don't love it, leave, would actually be very pro-immigration. Because surely, if you think, if you don't love it, leave, you also think, if you do love it, come. Oh, I brave death on the high seas because I love it so much. You must be chuffed, yes? Yeah, nah. Because that's not how language works, is it? Like, it's not symmetrical. You can't do that. Like, you know, the opposite of an insult is not a compliment. Which I discovered when I said to my girlfriend, you know what? I would piss on you if you were on fire. So, like, in a lot of ways, my parents' upbringing in Australia was a bit harder than mine. But in some ways, actually, they had it a bit easier because, like, they grew up in Fawkner, both of them. And at that time, Fawkner was like, it was just all Greeks. Like, it was like the Greek area, right? Whereas my dad, like, by the time I grew up, had moved to Hawthorne and there was fuck all Greeks around, right? So it just made me feel a little bit more different to everyone around. Like, so, you know, when I was at my primary school, like, there was only 2 Greeks. There was me and George Sardellis, and his dad ran one of the 2 milk bars, right? And the other milk bar was run by Randa Haddad. She was Turkish, so you can see why the Greeks and the Turks hate each other so much. Very different people. And but most of the kids at my school were like, you know, sort of like happy little Vegemite kids, wheat mix kids, you know. So they're all blonde and everything. So I wanted to be blonde, right? You know, I hadn't discovered tweezers. I just wanted the 2 eyebrows. You know, and they were all blonde kids, and you know, and I love blonde kids. I love them. I love them just as much as a Fox News kidnapping correspondent. And But mind you, my yaya, my grandma, she didn't help. One time I went to my yaya's house and she had this new frame that she'd bought, like just up, and she had this photo of these 3 blonde kids in it. She didn't know the kids. It was just the photo that came with the frame. And I was like, yeah, who are these Aryan wet dreams? And you know, she justified it, and I couldn't argue with it. She was just like, I like them. Great, all right, yeah, fine. I mean, you're not meant to put the photo in that comes with the frame. Like, I mean, that's like giving an Academy Award to the person minding the seat. So my parents came over in the 50s, and you know, like a lot of Cypriots, they came in the 50s, and you might not know much about Cyprus, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Cyprus. So Cyprus is a tiny island in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's not the same country as Greece, it's a different country, and the northern part of it is occupied by Turkey, right? It has been since 1974, when there was a war and a lot of people died, right? But that's par for the course for Cyprus. Like, you know, as a little tiny island that's not very big, can't really defend itself, but it's in a hugely strategic position in the middle of the Med. Basically, its 3,000-year history is Cyprus being occupied by the Egyptians and the Macedonians and like then the Turks and the Brits, and like basically all in the names of their kings and queens. Like basically, it's been grabbed at by more royals than a teen at an Epstein party. And was good. Oh, right. So Epstein didn't kill himself, but he's the reason I'm dying. Is that right? So right now, Turkey's occupying the northern half, right? And so. So my parents came over on a boat. They came on boats. Lots of people came on boats to Australia, didn't they? I mean, the British, they came on boats, and you know, a lot of your war contingent all came on boats. And you got to imagine that the original Indigenous inhabitants probably at some point also came on boats. Right? Out of those 3, my lot and the Indigenous Australians, only 2 had turned up legally. So no, Brits turned up legally. Terra nullius, mate. Best doctrine in the world. We all know about terra nullius, don't we? You know, it's the vibe, it's Marbo, and but that's why Indigenous Australians say they never ceded sovereignty, because you know they were like, it wasn't as empty as some people might have said that it was. I mean, that's so cool that you could do that, like just sail up in a ship and go, look at this. What are the odds of this? A completely empty country. Oh, hello there. Yes. As I said, a completely empty country. Dude, I think that's the definition of power, being able to just declare a country empty or full, yeah? You know, when we turn up, country's empty. When you turn up, country's full, mate. I think that's why Australians are like, country's full, mate, country's full, because they're terrified that if they say it's empty, someone else is going to nick it off them. That's how we got it in the first place, mate. Fooled you once. And, yeah, they're like, country's full, and people are like, no, it's not, there's heaps of space. Don't say that, country's full, terra plenus. So my grandparents both came separately, completely separately, made separate decisions to move to Melbourne, because apparently there are a lot of jobs here, but more importantly, other people's jobs. And that's the dream, isn't it? So my mum's dad's name was Louis, and he was a musician, right? He was a musician, he played the violin in a band with his brothers, and that's actually how he met my yaya, right? So they met when he played in the band at a wedding in my yaya's village, right? And the official family story goes that my yaya Bapul met at this wedding, and then a few days later my Bapul left and went back to Limassol where he was living, and then about 3 months later, my great-grandfather took the 2-day donkey ride down to Limassol to find my Bapul because my yaya was apparently besotted with him and heartbroken. Pregnant. It's my theory anyway. Looking back at my 30s, like the idea that like my whole family started because my yaya Bapul fucked after a gig is fucking spot on. And then later he ran a Greek restaurant in Lonsdale Street in Melbourne. It's called the Gypselia, that means the beehive. It was very famous for a long time. Always been a big foodie, my Bapul. Apparently when he first arrived in Australia, he had meat in his bag. Not vacuum packed meat, just meat. Dried goat. You know? In a scene that wouldn't have been out of place on border security. He told me this later, it was like they made him open his bag and the guy was like, what's this? And he goes, it is a delicacy. And apparently the border guy was like, You know what it is? It's shit. Why didn't you say something when I asked you anything to declare? And he's like, I did. I said, Turkish troops out of Cyprus. So my dad's name was Yianni, right? So I'm named after him. And he was a carpenter who hung out with whores. But that's where the Jesus similarities end. And joking about the whores, he didn't hang out with whores. Quite the contrary, we actually have a theory in our family. We'll never know if it's true or not, but we suspect that my uncle might have been gay, right? We think he might have been gay. Like, we've got a few reasons for this, like something that his brother said once, and like also, my dad's an only child. Like, there were no only child families back then. Like, you know, my mum's got like 6 brothers and sisters, her cousins have got like 12 brothers and sisters, and dad's sort of like, you know, parents were like, nah. Yeah, so, and also, you know, my brother's gay, and we're like, oh, he must have bought it from somewhere. And, yeah. So those are my grandfathers, right? So my dad's dad might have been married and he might have been gay. So like, you know, and it's like, because everyone had to get married, right? So I'm 41 and I'm not married, which is really weird because when I was 10, all I wanted to be was married, yeah? I mean, I wasn't particularly like into the marriage part, but Cypriots really incentivize it, yeah? So if you ever go to a Cypriot wedding, when they do the bridal waltz, right, the couple like dance around, and while they're doing that, all the guests will come up and pin money, right, onto the like 50s and 100s, and they'll attach one to another, so that by the end of the dance, they've just got ribbons of cash just flying off them. And I remember watching that and going, I want to get married. Ideally as many times as possible. It's like, la la la. Oh yeah, so I was like, I mean, I want to do that if I like ever get married. Like, I mean, I don't know how the transition to a cashless economy will affect that particular tradition. Like, maybe we're going to need to have like just various pay pass readers like hanging with us. Like, there's 20, 50, 100, 500, yeah? So, you know, someone goes to tap 20, you're like, switch, beep, 500. We do the bridal waltz, be like, la da 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 da, beep, 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 la da 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 da, beep, 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 beep. Just put in your pin, beep, 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 beep. Just enter it in, beep, 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 beep. Enjoy the main course, beep, 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 beep. But show no remorse, beep, 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 beep. When in a few weekends' time, we take the cash and get divorced. So my mum and dad were both born when my parents came over. My mum was 5 and my dad was 11. And my dad's name was Sonos, which means Terry. And why do people laugh at that? I don't know why. Well, the second lot, like, you're like, Sonos, Terry, how is that it? Or you're like, how are those two linked? Well, whatever it is, it was Greek first, so you're the problem. And, so yeah, so after moving from Cyprus, my dad spoke no English, and he was 11, and he went from speaking no English to being completely fluent, which allowed everyone around him to realise just how socially awkward he was. But he did very well for himself, right? Didn't speak a word of English at 11, and he ended up being a lawyer, got a law degree. Like, admittedly from Monash, but it's still a reasonable achievement. And yeah, and then my mum's name is Dorothy, but everyone calls her Dot. Everyone calls my mum Dot. And she worked at Myer for a little while, and then she was my dad's secretary for his legal business, and then she became a housewife, right? And everyone loves my mum. Like, my mum, like, no one has ever met my mum and not liked her. You know, I reckon she should have her own fan club. I've already like worked out the slogan. Just be like, join the dots. It's quite cute. And you know, and why do people come over? Well, they come over for a better life, you know. And I think everyone wants their children to have a better life than they have. And I remember thinking that I had a much better life than my dad when I was about 20, because I remember thinking, well, he shaves with these straight edge razors, and my ones have got like 5 blades that flex. And my dad was like, you know what's better than 5 flexi razors, Yianni? Owning property. And that's when I grew my beard. So a lot of people have different reasons for emigrating. Some people come for work. Some people fleeing war and persecution, and I've done both of those things. Well, not the war and persecution things, but I fled. I've fled. I've migrated 4 times in my life. I moved from Australia to Cyprus. We lived there for a year when I was 15, then from Cyprus back to Australia, then from Australia to the UK, and then from the UK back to Australia. And each of those 4 times I've been fleeing something. You know? The first time I didn't even realise we were fleeing. My dad was like, we're going to move to Cyprus in 1993. I was 15. He said, we're going to go back to reconnect with our roots. I thought that was what the truth was. It turns out he owed a whole lot of money to a bookie. So there you go. Which is a real shame that he moved over when that was happening, because, you know, he was really starting to integrate, because racking up a massive gambling debt is the most Australian thing you can do. So we moved to Cyprus, and I was looking forward to that, because, you know, at school a lot of people were like, oh, you're a wonk, you don't belong here. And I was like, well, it's going to be great because I'm going to belong over there. And then I went there. Of course I didn't fucking belong there either. My Greek wasn't good enough, you know. That was like one of the things. Like you might be like, oh, how good's your Greek, Yianni? Okay, well, I can only put it to you this way. I can have fairly rudimentary conversations. I cannot, however, say the phrase, fairly rudimentary conversations. All right? I've been told my Greek is quite cute. Which apparently, people's language is imperfect. It is sometimes quite cute. Like my Aya's English was always very cute. Like I remember, like if I had my PJs up like that, and you could see like my skin, she'd be like, "Yianni, your meat is showing." I'll just tuck that away then. So I was 15 when we went over, which is relevant because it turns out that because of all the stuff with the Turks, when you turn 16, if you've been there for more than 12 months, they won't let you leave the country until you do 2 years of military service. So my dad was like, we're not having that. So about a week before my 16th birthday, he swallowed me in a cloak of cowardice. And we just fled the country, conveniently taking him with me too, because being under 50, they would have taken him as well. Then I finished my BCom Hons LLB, and I thought, I'm not going to be a lawyer, so I fled to the UK to get away from responsibility and parental pressure. And I loved it in the UK. I actually, for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged, right? Not so much in the UK, but in London. London's a cool place, because like there's just people from everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. So you can be from anywhere and feel like a Londoner. And that's great. Like, I got to be a professional comedian for 15 years. I shouldn't probably say that in the past tense. I got to be, yeah. You didn't laugh enough there to reassure me. But ironically, funnily enough, when I lived in London, I ended up living in Stoke Newington, which if you know anything about London, that's where all the Turks live. So hilarious, right? I'd never met too many Turks, but I met heaps of them in Stoke Newington. And I liked it, I really liked it, because half the stuff is all the same, the Cypriot stuff and the Turkish stuff. Also when I go to the kebab shop, the guys would be, hello boss, and I just thought that was one for the good guys. And also all the local Turkish shops have all the same foods as all the Greek places, so I could go there and get all this food and just make my favourite dishes. My favourite dish that my yaya made was dolmades, or as you guys call them, dolmades. She used to make them with lamb mince. Oh, I love that. And then after we'd have that, we'd have after dinner mince. Also that. And she taught me her recipe, so I like making them. So you got to go and buy the vine leaves, right? So I went down to the Turkish shop to buy these vine leaves, and this is where I was like, people sort of act like they're all different, but if you live in the same place as someone, a lot of the culture is totally the same. So I went into the shop and I got the vine leaves and I put them on the counter, and this guy looked at me, the Turkish guy around the shop. He didn't know that I was Greek Cypriot. He just looked at me and he was like, you can't just eat these. And I was like, no, I'm going to make dolmades. And he was like, oh, that's so cool, I didn't know that. My wife's got a whole pot of them back at home at the moment. And I was like, that's so great. How much are these? And he was like, 2 quid. And I was like, what if I tell you I'm Greek Cypriot? And he was like, 5 quid. So funnily enough, as well as, having a lot of Turkish people around me when I lived in London, I also ended up spending a lot of time in Cyprus. Funnily enough, because, as a big irony, a lot of the gigs that I would do were for the British military who have bases in Cyprus, right? So as part of the deal, when the Brits gave Cyprus back to the Cypriots, they lopped off a couple of bases, right, on the south. And then during the Iraq War, what would happen is we do these gigs called decompression gigs. And as people were flying back from the Middle East, where they'd been in combat, they'd stop in Cyprus for like 48 hours of R&R, they'd go to the beach, they'd have a comedy show, there'd be music. And they were doing this because apparently before they did this, when they were going straight back home, some of them were getting a little bit punchy. So they were just trying to chill out. It's actually quite perfect, really, that British troops on the way back from an aggressive imperialist endeavour stop at what's left from a previous aggressive imperialist endeavour to be entertained by a comedian whose parents moved from one aggressively invaded place to another aggressively invaded place. Now, why did they have to stop there? Because apparently some of the aggressive soldiers on the way back from their aggressive war were being a bit aggressive. And And they were great gigs, like, you know, I saw a lot of paratroopers cocks, and yeah, you might be like, how did that happen, Yianni? Well, I'll tell you, because apparently paratroopers bond by doing stuff that is really tough but kind of gay. And, like, you know, it's like that volleyball scene in Top Gun, all the people in it go, this is really manly, and you're watching and going, gay! So like they would do like, you know, just psych you out, like you'd be doing a gig and like just you'd look down at some point and all the paratroopers would get their cock out. So I guess what I'm saying is thank you for being such a great crowd. And, but like you get different people depending on who was flying out. So sometimes it'd be Marines and sometimes it'd be engineers and sometimes it'd be medics and sometimes soldiers, and they're all completely different people, right? And it's where I discovered who I was. I discovered that I was a comedian on the way back from one of these gigs, because we were flying back from the gig, and on the plane one of the engines failed. Now, they didn't tell us that. They never tell you that at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to turn around because we're utterly fucked. They don't do that. We worked it out after we got back, but I knew it was bad. Because you know, like how, you know, when you sit next to the door and those seats have always got like extra legroom and they're like, are you able and willing to open the door in the case of an emergency? And you just say yes, even though you're like, I'll kill people before I die, right? And you know, you never think it's going to happen. But in this case, I knew it was bad because they took the people that they had there out and put like staff there. And I was like, that's not a good sign. But that's when I knew that I was a stand-up comedian, because as we were like flying back, not knowing whether we'd make it back alive, I turned to the person sitting next to me and I was like, you know, statistically it's much safer than driving. And then the Brexit vote happened in 2016, and that was all about immigration. Might surprise you to learn I voted Leave. Yeah. You know why? I mean, I know I was only in England because Cyprus joined the EU in 2004, but since the checks and the polls came in 2007, it didn't feel like my country anymore. Joking, I didn't vote Leave. Voted Remain, but lots of people did vote Leave, and it was all about immigration, yeah? Middle Britain was like, oh my goodness, look, people are arriving on our shores, and we don't particularly want them here. What have we, the British, ever done to deserve this? And they voted for it by a very small margin, and it's currently tearing that country apart, which is terrible. It really is. And like I said, I felt like I belonged there. And that's why, like, for me, pardon the strong language, but you know, Brexit made me feel really miffed. And more than that, irked. Sorry, vexed, peeved. It tells you all you need to know about the English, that they've got about 50 different passive-aggressive words for angry. And I could have stayed, I could have probably stayed, but I wanted to come back, spend some time with my parents, and also it was weird, like the tone of the country changed. I didn't feel welcome there anymore. And it's important to feel welcome where you live. Like my parents feel welcome in Australia now, but they tell me heaps of stories about like in the 50s, they didn't feel welcome then when they first came over. So like my mum told me that at her school, she had some candy lipstick that she put on her lips, and the principal, to punish her, like just like rubbed it off with a pumice stone. Like this, right? And then at the end of grade 6, all the students said which high school they wanted to go to, and some of them got into the high school they wanted and some of them didn't. So her teacher, when they were announcing which school my mum got into, just lied and told her she didn't get into the one she wanted because they know that she knew it would upset her, right? Like this is teachers doing stuff like this, right? Teachers. And you know, the kids take their cues from the teachers. You know, so like people, she's like, oh, I'd always get teased for my lunch, and I was like, really stretching if you're an Anglo kid teasing a Greek kid for lunch. Like, oh, what have you got there? I've got salami. Ooh, salami. Oh, if you think it's so bad, well, what have you got? I've got boiled everything. Boiled everything. Like, and you just know that girl who teased my mum is like 70 now, going, oh, have you been down to the local continental deli? Stenos does the most amazing things with chickpeas. You really must try it. Anyway, I must be off. I'm scared to be out with all these Sudanese gangs around. That's right, I don't hate Greeks, just whoever arrived last. Well, that's the rule, isn't it? That is the rule in this country, I know it. We've all seen it. It's whoever's new cops it. And then you've got to cop it for 20 years, and then someone else cops it, and you're like, oh, thank God. Right? I don't think Australians are as racist as people think, but we're definitely xenophobic. Like, anything new, we're like, ugh. Like, Australians even hated new white people. Yeah? Way back in the day, I read this book, and apparently, like, back in the 1800s, in the early 1800s, like, freed convicts hated settlers who came over from England. They were all like, it's a convict country for convicts, mate. So they just hated free settlers. I mean, it just goes to show people have always hated people from Adelaide. And but it's like this sequence, isn't it? So it goes free settlers, Catholics, Jews, Wogs, Asians, and now we all know it's Muslims, isn't it? It's Muslims now. They're the ones who are copying it. Oh, you can't have it, mate. You can't have it. You know what? They're trying to hijack our legal system. I heard that one. You might be like, where'd you hear that, Yianni? Was it in one of your law books that you studied? No. I saw it on a bumper sticker. It was like, no to Sharia law in Australia. And you might be like, Yianni, that person has no credibility. But for added credibility, I saw it on a truck, which had testicles on the tow bar. Right? And some people genuinely believe that we're going to institute Sharia law as the actual law of Australia. Do you know what would have to happen for that to occur? We'd have to have a referendum, which would need to pass in a majority of states, including fucking Queensland. Oh, yes to Sharia? Fuck now. Not gonna happen. Listen, Queensland's a real double-edged sword, it's beautiful, the weather's very nice, and it acts as a necessary sort of block against both Labor governments and Sharia law, which Queenslanders say are the same thing. Ironically, in Cyprus, which is half occupied by a Muslim force, never seen a fucking bumper sticker, not once. Just in Perth, next to the truck nuts. That's it. A lot of you are like, Yianni, is Turkey a Muslim country? Didn't Ataturk make reforms in the 20s that made it secular? Yeah, but that fucks up that joke. But people do with Muslims now what they used to do with Greeks or Italians or Catholics or whatever. They judge the whole group by the worst ones, right? And you can see this. I was in a Coles in Adelaide, and they had, they've got it here too, Sports for Schools program, right? So you go and do your shopping, every $10 you spend they give you a ticket, and then they've got these bins, right? One for each school, and you whack your tickets in there, and the more tickets that are in there, the more money they give the school. Basically, they're pitting public schools against each other for survival, right? For corporate welfare. Go on, do you want a ball? Fucking, kiss ass. And the kids all draw pictures and put them on there like, please give us money. It's really... Anyway, and the other thing that I thought was a bit on the nose was they're see-through, so you can see how many tickets there are in each bin. So there was this Muslim school, right? Noticeably less tickets for that one. So you know what I did with my tickets? You know what I did? I ripped them all up and I went 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And the checkout chick saw me do it and she was like, I've never seen anyone do that. Do you ever think, yeah, I am better than other people? Because this is how people make political decisions. Every bin's a party. Actually, that's quite a good metaphor. And every party's a bin, and people chuck all their tickets in, and then they yell at people who put tickets in the other bin. Right? The key is to realise that a fair number of the kids at all of these schools are going to turn out to be cunts and hedgehogs. Maybe Abdul's going to join ISIS, but Frank's going to punch someone in the head and they're going to die. It's going to be bad people from everywhere. And the other thing people say about Muslims, which is funny because they said the same thing about Catholics 150 years ago, was oh no, it's a radical religion. They can't owe allegiance to Australia and us because it's a fundamentally radical religion. And so all Muslims are fundamentally radical and you can't de-radicalise them. I'm telling you, even if it is, you can de-radicalise them. I've seen my mum do it. Yeah. You're right not to laugh. You need more information, I get. I would laugh, Yianni, but I'm scared, right? So my best mate at primary school was Muslim, right? His name was John Adams. That's not a Muslim name. Yes, it is. His father was Australian and his mum was Indonesian. And we lived on the same streets. Every day after school we would play on my Commodore 64, play on his Apple IIe. We'd sit there, pretend to be hacking the Pentagon, yeah? Ooh, Yianni, hacking the Pentagon with your Muslim best friend. Ooh, 1986 was a simpler time, wasn't it? It was a simpler time. Back then, people loved E.T. even though he was an illegal alien. Yes, mate, but we loved him because he was trying to get home. So because he was being raised Muslim, John had to pray 5 times a day, right? So in the middle of when we were playing, sometimes if we were at his house, he'd be like, I've got to go pray. And he'd just run into his room, put his prayer mat down, do his prayers, and he'd come back out and we'd keep playing. Or when we were at my place, he'd run all the way to his house, it was like 50 metres, do his prayers, and then he'd come back, right? And one time he was at my house, and my mum brought in a plate of sandwiches. She was like, here you go, boys, I made you some sandwiches. And he looks and he goes, I'm sorry, Mrs. Agisilaou, I can't eat. It's Ramadan and I'm fasting. And my mum was just like, just eat it. No one will know. And John was like, you can de-radicalise, but you just need good sandwiches, is what I'm saying. Another time, I was doing the 40-hour famine, and my mum organised a dinner party for hours 28 through 32. And I was like, Mum, I'm doing the 40-hour famine. And she was like, Yianni, I think what's important is that you're being sponsored and that the African kids will get the money. I was like, I think what's important is that African kids don't have a mum going, just have a dinner party. And then I went, what I'm saying is basically any principles you might have, my mum can feed them out of you. And often it's like conservatives who are super against immigration, which I think is really strange because a lot of immigrants are actually very conservative people. Like you might get some more votes if you stop demonising them. People say, oh, Muslim values, they're incompatible with Aussie values, but like half the stuff Muslims do now, all Greeks were doing the same thing like 50 years ago. So like even in my family alone, like my grandparents tried to organise arrange a marriage for my auntie when she was like 17 and a half years old, or like my mum got the shit beaten out of her if she ever like talked to a boy, like very conservative stuff. Like my mum couldn't even wear jeans. Like she bought a pair of jeans and my papa was like, you're not wearing those, and he like ripped them apart, right? But my mum's nothing if she's not a little bit rebellious, right? So she sewed them back together when I was at work. So my papa was like, nah. I was just like, nah. It's the festival's #2 sewing joke, and like people feel like, I think it's this thing of people feel like they're losing their own country. Like it's funny when white people go, I'm losing my country. You go, if only there was some precedent that you could look at. And people have this idea they're being replaced or something, and it's really weird because I know this from being from Cyprus. Like people when they feel like they're like being replaced or they've lost their country, they do this, like it leads to very strange behaviours. Like Turkish delight, yeah? You know what it's called in Cyprus? Cyprus delight. I'm just like, guys, I think we lost this one. Just let it go. Greek coffee, Turkish coffee, same thing. Exactly the same thing, right? Just a different name. Has to be, because you can't sell Turkish coffee in Greece, won't do it, right? Bushels has 2 different products. It's exactly the same coffee in the jar. The jar is exactly the same size. The only difference is one of them says Greek coffee and one of them says Turkish coffee. Well, actually, that's not the only difference. The other difference is the Turkish one's 10 cents cheaper. So I was like, what should I do? So I did the Greekest thing possible, which was to buy the cheap one. That sound Greekonomic policy. Always pay the least that you are legally able to pay. And if possible, maybe a little bit less than that. Huh? It's called the Kalambaris principle. Yeah. And apparently you can rag on certain groups because they don't integrate. That's the other thing. They don't integrate. And these people they act like they want them to integrate. Oh yeah. Why aren't there more Africans in Peppermint Grove? Oh, they'd love that, wouldn't they? Peppermint Grove wouldn't even merge with Cotslow Council because they didn't want to give up their valet wheelie bin service. If anyone doesn't integrate, it's Peppermint fucking Grove. And my papa was like, this is the same thing about Greeks in the 50s, and people used to say Catholics weren't Australian because they owed allegiance to the Pope, so they couldn't possibly owe allegiance to Australia. And it's so it's such a charged thing now. You can't even have a reasonable discussion about it. Has anyone ever seen a reasonable discussion of Islam online? It's like going to Bunnings and only buying the thing you went for. Like, it never fucking happens. And it's not just Australia, right? I'm not just saying like ragging on Australia. It's the same in Cyprus. Like, I was in Cyprus, I was talking to my cousin, and she was like, I was talking about racism, and she goes, Yianni, I want to live in a Cyprus with no racism and no Turks. Just saying, if they're all gone, it wouldn't be a problem, huh? But if you were all gone, there wouldn't be a problem. That would be a problem for me. What I'm saying is, give the Muslims time, right? I promise you, they'll be white in 50 years. Yeah, okay, let me explain this, okay? Because you're like, oh, they might not be white. They're not white, but whiteness isn't a colour, right? Because it's not, okay? Because like, okay, when my mum grew up, she was called a wog by her teachers at school, right? That's the teachers. That was in the 50s, right? Then when I went to school, I only got called a wog by the students. Guys, it's progress. It's progress. And then last year, I got told off online for being a straight white guy. How good is that? Only in Australia could I, the child of dirty, dirty wog immigrants, ascend to the rank of straight white guy. So swiftly. After a lifetime of racial slurs, guys, it's not even an insult to me. It's a compliment, yeah? I seek it out, yeah? I go online and I make ill-informed comments in inappropriate forums. I log on to Mothernet, make comments about the second and third trimester, and then I wait for the backlash. I just sit there waiting for my alerts, you know? There'll always be something like, congratulations, you've won the award for best straight white male comment. And I just go, one, to be honest, it's just an honour to be nominated. You might be like, well, you know, of course you're white, Yianni, look at you. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm the same colour as my parents, and they weren't white at the time. So whiteness changes. Like, it's just like a proxy for like just people we just don't question, right? And you know, people we just let say shit and we don't be like, you don't like this country, you don't belong here. Like, and I saw this like in real life when I was about 14. So like when I was 14, I read this article in the Herald Sun, right? It's kind of like the West that you've got here, but without the knick-knack fetish. And it was about these two women, and one of them was brown and one of them was white, and they both needed some medical treatment, and the white lady got it and the brown lady didn't get it, right? And I was outraged. I was like, this is not fair. It's not fair, right? This will not stand. I've been listening to Public Enemy. I had a very strong social conscience at the time. And I thought, I am going to express my displeasure by writing a letter in to the 50-50 column, right? So I wrote the letter, some screed, I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but you know, at the end I signed it off and I was like, Yianni Agisilaou, social justice warrior. Hawthorne 3122, and I sent it off, right? And I didn't know, but it did eventually get published. We found out. Now, my last name is terrible. If you want to remember it, I'll be like, oh, just Google it. That's the way to find me. It's terrible for that. If you want anyone to spell it, it's terrible for that. But I'll tell you what, if you want to look up my phone number using nothing but it and a suburb that I've also very conveniently provided you, it's brilliant for that. So that's basically what happened, because the day the Herald Sun got published, we started getting these angry voicemails on the phone, right? I'm really glad it was like voicemails. Like, you know, imagine if it was phone calls, my dad would be like, hello? Is this the fucking Agisilaou residence? No, Barry Juris. And, you know, and Dad played me the messages, and they were like full on. There were people going, you better watch your back, you dirty Greek bastard. I was like, whoa. He knows it's a Greek name. I was so pleased. We've come such a long way, Australia. I mean, the violence of the threat was rooted in ignorance, but it was meticulously researched. I just pictured the guy, like, you know, getting all fumed up with his wife in the room, and he was just like, oh, look, I've worked it out, darling. He's a dirty Greek bastard. And she'd be like, oh, that's very nice, dear. Maybe do a bit more research, a bit more specificity. He might be scared more if you know more about him. Oh, that's a great idea. Oh, he does a bit more research. Oh, the suffix is Turkish. Probably a Cypriot bastard. Oh, very good, dear. You're so resourceful when you're angry. Just looks at her with love in his eyes. You make me a better hothead. Mwah. But one thing it did make me realise is that, you know, like sometimes the message is less important than the messenger, right? Not everyone gets to have opinions, the same opinions, right? Like, you know, people kind of go, oh, you know, Waleed Ali, it's not that he's Muslim, it's just, oh, he's fairly radical. You know? Or people go, Adam Goods, it's not that he's an Aboriginal, I just don't think that sport is a place for politics. You know, it's always just a coincidence that it happens to be these people. But now that I'm white, like, I get away with all sorts of shit. I was in a taxi in Essex, and I was coming back from a gig. So you got to lift from the gig to the train station. And I got a taxi driver. He was banging on about these immigrants, right? It's these fucking immigrants. I was like, have you heard me talk? Anyway, but he was like, they don't pay tax. That's the thing. They don't pay tax. It's all cash, and they don't pay tax. And I didn't tell him I just got paid cash from that gig, and I might not declare it. And I declared it all anyway. But now that Brexit happened, I kind of wish I didn't. But and then he was like, yeah, he was banging on about it, immigrants this, immigrants that, tax this, tax that. And we get to the train station, and I said, can I please have a receipt? And he gave me the receipt, and then he gave me like a few blank receipts. Like he was like, there you go, mate, a few blank ones, fit it in yourself. Basically, I was like, what, am I living the fucking Twilight Zone? This guy spent the entire trip telling me that immigrants evade tax, and now he's facilitating me, an immigrant, evading tax. But this is when I realised, I'm not an immigrant, right? I'm not, because I'm white, or I'm like, I'm good, I'm okay, I'm fine. He's not giving it to Abdul though, is he, right? Abdul's not getting any receipts. And, you know, and I see this everywhere. It's everywhere, and, you know, the key's to travel, I think, you know, because like the more you travel, the more you see people are all the same, you know, same fears, same hopes, same dreams, but also everyone is slightly different, you know, because we all live in different places and stuff. But ironically, the most Australian I've ever felt is when I'm traveling. Like, the further away from Australia I am, the more Australian I feel. The most Aussie I ever felt was at the World Cup World Ball in 2006 in Germany, right? We were in Stuttgart and we were playing Croatia, and it was great. So the great thing about the World Cup is you just have thousands of Aussies and thousands of Croatians, and everyone's up for a good time. And the day before the game, there's this big square in Croatia. It's just lined with pubs, like beer halls, and everyone's sitting there drinking and having a real great time. And then just at some point, all these Croatians start banging out their soccer songs, right? They start singing their Croatian soccer songs in Croatian. I don't know what the words are, but they're obviously soccer songs, and they're obviously songs, they all know them. They've probably learnt them from their mum and dad, you know, and they've had them for years because they've been in heaps of World Cups. But we hadn't been in a World Cup for 30 years, so we were all looking around going, no songs. We have no songs. Well, what are we going to do? And then this guy, right, just had this idea, and I'm going to say what he said. And if you know the words, feel free to join in. It's a lot of fun. We just out of nowhere, we just heard this guy go, my dad picks the fruit that goes to Cotties to make the cordial that I like best. And we were all like, we know this. And we just started banging it out. And all the Croatians were like, what the fuck is going on? Do they all have the same father? And it was like, and then like once we had the idea, bam, we were off. Like we just did commercials for about half an hour. We did Happy Little Vegemites, we did Lubmobile. We even remembered the little phone number that Bogan kid tells you at the end. We were like, it's 13, 13, 32. And then we did Banana Boat, doo doo doo, Banana Boat, doo doo doo. And then on the banana theme, like someone else was like, ba-na-na-na-na-na, na-na-na, make those bodies sing. And then someone suggested maybe we could do a banana medley, but it was too late because we were already on to, no, Gary, no! And then just when we thought we'd run out of ads and we were going to have to get off the front foot, I don't suppose you like cricket, Yianni, then we, out of the darkness, this guy just started singing, you know, we belong together. I even heard some of the Croatians joining in on that one. And we're like, fuck it, you know, we're all Australians, we might not have much culture, but we've all seen the same commercials. And it made me worried because, like, you know, we all knew those commercials. You know why? Because we had 5 channels and that was it. Like, you know, 20 years, what are the kids of today going to do? They're going to be like, let's do some memes. No, can't have that. I mean, we've still got ads now, but like you'd be busting it out and 5 seconds later everyone will just be struck dumb because they're like, that's where I click through. Oh, skip ad. So I think my idea for Australia to unify Australia is that we need to make it legally required that we all listen to an hour of commercials every day. Okay? Because I feel like that's what being Australian is. It's like, it's that we all know similar things because we've all occupied the same physical space and the same psychic space, you know. So sometimes it's knowing commercials, and sometimes it's knowing the difference between a goal and a behind, and sometimes it's knowing who Thorpe is, and sometimes it's knowing about Gallipoli, but it might also be knowing about Indigenous Australians' connection to their land, or it might be knowing who David Anipon is, or Neville Bonner, the first Aboriginal MP, or it could be, you know, knowing about what a souvlaki is and what a fur is, you know, because of the immigrants that have come here, and it's all of these things. But also, I feel like it's not like ring fencing part of it, and kind of going, mine, you know, this is Australian and that's not, and you can all fuck off. Like, that's just, because I don't, like, my family comes from an island which has an actual physical split down the middle, and a psychic split too, and there's no future in it. Like, so for 30 years, between when they had the war in Cyprus and when, 2004, the only way you could get into the northern part is you had to go via Turkey, because the whole country, northern part, wasn't recognised internationally. Then in 2004, they just opened a bit of the border up so you could just show your passport and go through, right? So I was like, I'm definitely going to go through. So I walked through this barrier, right, into this country, which was my country, but kind of not my country anymore. And the last thing I saw before I left the Greek side was this coffee shop, and there were these old Greek men there drinking coffee and playing tavli, which is backgammon, right? With their little worry beads like this. And then I walked through, and the first thing I saw on the other side was a coffee shop with these old Turkish guys with worry beads. They were playing tavla, backgammon. And I was like, I'm going to go sit down, and I went and sat down at this coffee shop, and I ordered a Turkish coffee, and and I watched these guys play tabla, right? And I started chatting to this guy, and he told me that, like, you know, his name was Chan, that was his surname, and he used to live in Larnaca, which because everyone used to live in the same place. He lived in Larnaca, was where my bapu was from. He told me exactly where in Larnaca. I was like, dude, that's right near my bapu's house. And he said, like, he used to make shoes, but now he just goes to the coffee shop and he plays tabla all day, and that's what he does. And he said, do you like tabla? And I was like, no, I'm more into cricket. And, and he said, I didn't suppose you'd like cricket. And I was like, let's play tabla, right? So I played tabla with this guy that my grandparents would have had me completely hate, but he was just a guy like me, and he won, of course. And when he won, but I'm quite competitive, when he won, I was like, not happy, Jan! And he didn't know what the fuck I was talking about. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Please get on social media and tell your friends. Tell them to come so that I don't need to be on a TV show called Up and Comers 2035. And you know, I actually don't tell them to come because it's finished now, so. But I'll do the last joke because it's a good joke. And it does end the show. So let's imagine that there are more shows next week. It's possible, right? They announce awards. Normally, awards help you sell tickets. If I get nominated for an award, I'll add some more shows. So, you know, look sharp. And so yeah, tell them to go to fringeworld.com.au and look up Yianni Agisilaou. And then when they ask you the inevitable question, tell them it's the usual spelling. Thank you very much for coming.